Hi everyone. We'll get started in just a few seconds.
Hi, Arati.
Hello.
Welcome to the live.
Thank
Um,
you. Can you hear me okay?
yes. Am I clear as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. So let me just briefly set a little bit of context, and then we'll be coming over to you with a few questions. So hi everyone, welcome to this Instagram live conversation where we're going to be talking about a few different things, but one of them being the role that art and storytelling play in creating change. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Sneha Philip, and we're going to be speaking with Arati Kumar-Rao. Arti is a very talented, artist, photographer, writer. She's been documenting changing landscapes across the Indian subcontinent. And what that means, for the people who live in those landscapes, people who live at the margins, their livelihoods, ecosystems, a whole range of things. And she's captured a lot of that in the book that she published last year. It's called Margin Lands, Indian Landscapes on the Brink. And Arti was also named one of BBC's 100 influential and inspiring women from around the world last year. So Arti, really thrilled to have the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you so much for joining us.
My
Um,
pleasure entirely. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. So yeah, maybe, I mean, to kick off, can you tell us a little bit about how you came to do what you do? How did that happen?
So I think it's interesting because usually when there's a pause in, when you're running to stand still and then suddenly there's a pause and you're forced to take a break, your mind starts wondering about all the possibilities of what you could do. And that's precisely what happened to me. I was in a corporate job, but I fell sick and I was in bed for 2 months and I had to and it was a good time to evaluate my life, reevaluate my life. And I realized that this is something that I always wanted to do. Right from when I was a kid, I wanted to tell stories about landscapes. And a corporate job was very nice. I was having a lot of fun. Yes, I had a great boss, but it was not giving me that kind of satisfaction that storytelling always gave me. And so I decided to quit my corporate job and start telling stories. Of course, it had to be about the environment because right from when I was very little, these conversations were always on in our house, conversations about the nature of development, the environment, who benefits, who stands to lose, how much and why, and what that kind of mindset is leading to and where it's come from. All kinds of things that used to always go on in our house. My father used to read from Wendell Berry to us. And at that time, of course, it was a little bit of a drag. We were like, ah, and all that, very young kids. And but slowly, I think over time, I came to realize the abundant wisdom of Wendell Berry and people like him, writing so eloquently about the land and about how agriculture should be and how we should treat the land. And so my father also was very in the mind of renewable sources right from the early 80s or late 70s even. And he was also very strongly of the opinion that a large dam is not a renewable source in the best way. And so there were a lot of those conversations. So I grew up with all of that. So when it came time for me to pick a path, I kind of already had it made. There was no other thing that I would rather do than tell stories about the landscape and about what we're doing to it.
That's amazing, and I'm so glad that's how it played out for you. Um, and so, why art? Why storytelling? What do you think the opportunity or the potential that it holds to ultimately create some kind of change? Why is that the medium you've chosen?
Yeah. Um, Stories, I think everybody connects with. It's universal, and it's the human uh, DNA. To tell and to listen to stories. From time immemorial, you sit around a campfire and you share what happened in the day, and you share experiences, you share opinions, you share all kinds of things, right? So I think that kind of storytelling connects people, and it also connects people with issues if a story is told well. And so for me, storytelling was, there was really no other way. I couldn't think of any other way to explore and even learn what's going on in the world, rather than delve into storytelling and into stories. So that itself was very compelling. I grew up poring over National Geographics, and seeing how stories were mapped out there, as well as how they were illustrated. And both even the maps, the illustrations, the photographs, I would read the captions. I was young. I would not read the whole article. I would read the captions. So there were a couple of articles, three articles, which I read end to end, like the Mega Transect of Michael Fay, where he walks across the Congo, written by David Quammen, and shot by Michael Nick Nichols. That was just very, very influential in my in how I felt stories needed to be told. So that really informed my sensibilities, that I thought that it had to be storytelling, but also storytelling in the sense that it didn't need to only be words, because that then is one audience who reads, but then there is another audience that comes into a story through visuals. There is another audience that comes into story through sound, through theater, through film, through so many different ways, right? You can enter the same story from so many different angles. And I felt that, and exploring that and trying to upskill myself in as many tools as I could, that I could use to tell a story well, was important. And so I just felt that, how can you, these are complex issues, right? Development, environment, even climate change, all of that, such complex issues. And how do you then, com- how do you convey these kinds of concepts to people in a way that they can relate? And art, I think, and art used in the broadest sense, not just drawing art in the broadest sense, storytelling, soundscapes, music, all of that. There's so many ways that you can involve people and influence, and have a dialogue really with people, conversation and debate even. And so that's why I felt that employing as many different tools as I could to tell the story would behoove, and would also do right by the story itself, because so many things in a story is better conveyed either in an image or in a drawing or in a sometimes you can't take an image of places, you shouldn't take an image of some people, all of those sensibilities, right? So then illustration comes in, or some kind of a metaphor comes in, and so on. So there's so many ways to tell a story effectively. And I think I'm still on the quest. Each story is different, so I'm still on the quest to find the best ways to tell a story, and try my hand at different things, different ways of doing it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And how do people react to your storytelling and to the different kinds of ways in which you chronicle what you've seen and what you've experienced? Is there like a range of reactions? Could you tell us about, give us a peek into that?
Yeah, I don't know how much of this is an echo chamber and how much of this is really wide. I can't tell, but it's always interested people, and the way. Either if I've approached a story through photographs, or through words, or through art, illustrations, etc., or soundscapes, it has interested people. People have written in. People have said they've started seeing things differently. They loved something. They'd never noticed that sound before. They'd never thought of seeing a landscape in a certain way. So those kinds of you know. responses are very illustrative and informative for me as a storyteller, as pointing the way forward of what to do more of, and how to maybe massage some ways of telling a story into others, and so on. People by and large are very generous, and they're always they're very uh, forthcoming and with praise. And I look forward to those brickbats, because that always helps me then, change, go up a notch, try, push myself harder. And some of those do come through. I have been kept honest by many of my wildlife biologist friends, who say, hey, that's not quite the way it is, and this is how you should see it, and so on, early on especially, which is great, because I stand on the shoulders of all of these people who do such good research. And so there's all kinds of different, like you said, a variety of range of responses, but mostly people engage, because these are stories. These are stories of the human condition. And that, I think, appeals widely. It's also the fact that I think we are so cocooned in our urban lifestyles, really, that some of these stories show us a different way of living, show us a different side of life, show us a different part of the world which we don't necessarily interact with on a daily basis. Or maybe we should and we do, but we just don't realize that we do. So some of those things are startling, are astonishing to people, and that then again, in another way, creates a dialogue. So I think the best part about it is the fact that there have been dialogues, there have been responses. If there were no responses, I would feel very, very strange, creating in a vacuum. So I think all responses have been welcome, and mostly it has been that of astonishment. And I'm really glad that there is that wonder and there is that interest and curiosity alive in the audience.
Yeah, sounds, I've been reading your book, and I can imagine just why there is so much astonishment and wonder in response to your work. So yeah, that kind of adds up. Yeah, yeah. I think you've crisscrossed the country, borrowing language that I read elsewhere, and you've been in the Thar Desert, you've been at river basins, wetlands, a whole range of places. But I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the time you spent in the Thar Desert, and you describe it as an unforgiving environment, and you talk about how it gets 4 inches of rain every year, but that life thrives nonetheless. There is an ecosystem, and it's not just surviving; it's a thriving ecosystem. And there are people, there are communities there who really have found ingenious ways to survive and thrive in that space. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What you've seen, what their relationship with that ecosystem is like, with that landscape is like, and what's changing as well over there.
Yeah, that in many ways was my introduction to how to read a landscape, the Thar Desert. It all started with a chance meeting in a cafe coffee day, which was cafe coffee day in Bangalore at Vittal Malya Circle, which no longer is, where I met S. Vishwanath, who is the who's Zen Rain Man, and he passed the single number to me, saying, "Go visit Chattar Singh in the desert and see what they do and how they harvest rainwater." And I had primarily come to Vishwanath saying, "I want to write about freshwater. I want to tell stories about freshwater," and he was sending me to a desert. So it was almost like it really flummoxed me, and I wasn't sure how to go about it. But then, hey, I said, okay, let's do this. One place is as good as another. And so, armed with this one phone number, I set off to the desert. And it was interesting. I jumped into a public bus at Jaisalmer bus station, and I told them that the bus was going towards Ramgarh. So I went in that bus, and everybody was staring at me. And, I think I was sitting on that little seat next to the driver, the
Uh-huh.
one which is
Yeah.
sideways. And that was the only place left. It was a packed bus. It had goats, it had everything in the bus. It was very interesting. And so I was sitting, and everybody was staring at me because, of course, I looked nothing like them, and I was not dressed like them. And then I think finally the bus driver could hold it back no longer, and he asked me where the heck I was going, and I said I was going to Ramgarh, and he said, Ramgarh, why? So I said, I'm going to meet somebody. I want to do some work there. And he said, where will you stay? I said, well, there must be a hotel or something. I'll stay in a smaller hotel also. It's fine. I'll stay. And the whole bus, because they were kind of listening into the conversation, they started laughing. And I was like, what? Why are they laughing? And they said that Ramgarh does not have any hotel. It's a very tiny, dusty little BSF outpost, There's no hotel there, which has changed now. 10 years on,
Okay.
12 years on. But at that time, there was nothing. And I was like, oops, And then I tried calling that number which Vishwanath had given me, and there was no answer. I was like, double oops, what do I do now? So the bus, of course, dropped me at a tea stall at a crossroads. And I ordered some tea, and I kept calling this number, and there was no response. And I was like, great, I'll just maybe catch the next bus back or something. I was just sitting there and having my second cup of tea when my phone rang, and Chatar Singh had called back, and he said he was coming to get me. And within 5 minutes of sitting down with him and having yet another cup of tea, he asked me, so how much time do you have? Because I'd asked him, I wanted to come and see the rainwater harvesting in the desert. And he said, how much time do you have? And I said, well, I have a one-way ticket. I haven't booked my ticket back. So, and he loved that answer. He said, because you really need time to understand the landscape. And I remember June of 20, I think it would be June 2015. And I'm sitting on top of this dune with Chatar Singh. It has been 2 years since it has rained, 22 months actually. And he starts digging into the dune. And on the top of the dune, 6 inches in, he brings out wet sand. And I was shocked. I was like, wet sand? And he said, yeah, people don't realize that the dune holds water in its belly. There's so much water in the desert. Even 22 months after having no rain, there was still water in the dune. And then we climbed down the dune, and there's no elegant way to do that. You just slide your way down the dune. And at the bottom of the dune, there are hand-dug wells made by shepherds. And I think that was a realization, of when we talk about water diviners and, people who are able to tell where water is and stuff like that. I think they're just really good readers of the landscape, because who would have thought at the base of a dune you could have a giving well, right? But these people knew how the desert worked. And so they knew to dig, and it's a hand dug well, and 3 feet into the well, it's brimming with water. I even have videos of it filling up, because shepherds had just pulled up water. So the well was replenishing itself, and you could hear those little drops of water going down. And it was fascinating. And so it was just, it was my introduction to the fact that if you know how to read a landscape, if you know how a land behaves, you really can truly thrive, no matter how harsh the landscape is. And then, of course, I went on to learn so much more about how some of these traditional dryland farmers, knowing how to just with rain-fed agriculture, no external irrigation, have grown wheat, have grown all kinds of crops, and have gone from being beggars because they had no water earlier to channeling this ancient method of rainwater harvesting to become crorepati's. So, it was a revelatory 2 years of, going back to the desert. I went back, the first year I went back every month. I would walk the desert, the wild part of the desert with Pradeep Krishan and my 2 naturalist friends, Harsha and Payal. We'd all go out 5:30 in the morning, walk through the desert and actually learn about the flora and the fauna. And then after that trip, I would go off to meet Chatar Singh, and I'd learn about how the people of the desert use the desert. So it was, kind of this meld of both the naturalist way of looking at it and the cultural, how it dovetails. And it dovetailed beautifully, because we would have seen plants and things in the trip with Pradeep Krishan, which then I would learn is used by the shepherd or is excellent for treating a sheep which is sick or something like that, And so people used the desert differently, and creatures used the desert differently. And so it was really a revelatory way of, just the fact that a desert is a lovely, alive ecosystem. It's not, what our traditional metaphors kind of allude to as dead as a desert and, banjar zameen and all of that. That truly comes from, I think, not understanding what the landscape is, or even referring to a dust bowl, which could be well man-made, created with, bad agricultural practices or whatever. So a desert itself is an alive ecosystem. And I think that taught me that, first of all, time, because it's a rhythm and there's seasons to the way the desert behaves, and you have to come back to see how things change. And so spending time in a landscape is essential, and seeing a landscape through those who use those landscapes very well and who who know how to read the landscape. So people who are sitting so far away, we could just drive through the desert and not see anything and not know anything. But if you walked, or you walked with the walkers who are the shepherds, you see it very differently. So that has been so, and I think that has been invaluable to me. And any landscape I'm in now, I know that I'm seeing not even a fraction of what the people who live there see, whether it be fishermen on the Brahmaputra, or the shepherds in the desert, or even the fishermen in Kerala, on the marine fishermen. The way they read the landscape, that knowledge is priceless. It's invaluable. And that, unfortunately, is what we're losing.
I was just going to come to that actually. Are you seeing that change? Where are we
Yeah.
kind of at today?
Unfortunately, everybody is seeing that change. Even the people who live in these landscapes, like Chatar Singh himself told me that his son no longer knows how to read the desert. He doesn't even know the names of these clouds that we talk about. I talk about that in the book. The son doesn't know how to read the clouds. A Nishi elder in Pake Tiger Reserve told me that the education that the kids were getting, the Nishi kids, the tribal kids were getting, was completely useless for their life in the forest. That they were not, they could come back to nothing. They didn't understand anything of how they lived. They were being taught something that was so general and so removed that it really didn't equip them to live life in these landscapes. So yeah, we're losing it in so many ways, because of that disconnect from the land. And that disconnect is very stark, especially in the cities. We are so cocooned in our ivory towers, in our gated communities, in our bubbles, that we just don't know how to read the landscape anymore. And when we lose that memory of landscapes, when we lose the importance of local geographies, that's when these interlopers and these charlatans can step in with their marketing budgets and just usurp, the landscape for things. And then we'll find ourselves in exactly the trouble we're in right now. In so many places, I live in a part of Bangalore which floods with 2 days of, the last 2 years have been crazy. We've even had these very swanky gated communities floating in rainwater, simply because somebody did not read the landscape well, or willfully decided to flout how a landscape should be used. So we'll find ourselves more and more in such things if we lose that, that read of local geographies.
Yeah, yeah. What do us urban folks need to be understanding more of, and doing more of, in terms of how we interact with the natural world that we're very much a part of?
Exactly.
You
I'm so
know,
glad you put it that way. So
yeah,
many people ask me, how do we reconnect with nature? And I'm like, no, nature's all around us. We are part of nature. We're already connected. It's just that we need to
yeah,
be aware of it.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
so right. And so how can we do that? I think, it's, I feel very strongly that there's this, it's my favorite quote from Aldo Leopold, and I have to go back to it and I have to say it because it just makes abundant sense. Even though he said it in 1949, we are in 2024 and it's still, so relevant. He said something like this. He said, civilization so clutters the elemental man-earth relationship with gadgets and middlemen that awareness of it is growing dim. We imagine industry is what supports us, forgetting what supports industry. And by that, he obviously meant the land and the environment. And so I think for us in the city, it would be just fabulous to wear a pair of walking shoes, just, get out of our cars, get out of, our AC environs and just walk around, reconnect with the geography of even the suburb we're staying in, and see how we are changing it, because we're changing it quite drastically. We're building where water naturally flows. We're therefore obstructing water, and I think that just comes from the disconnect and that not understanding. The minute people start seeing things, things change. Then, people organize, and then they start getting, very, very clear about, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that. Of course, the solutions may be still tech and, not necessarily the right way to approach it or a lasting way to approach it. But at least there's awareness. And so I think if we could reclaim that, if we could even just open out our windows, look outside and notice, just what the air feels like around us and why, and how it's changing, how the water flows are changing around us, where our water is coming from and why. In Bangalore, for example, everybody knows now that there's a water crisis in Bangalore, but beyond just that, right? Why is there a water crisis? And we are part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So even understanding and identifying the problem correctly and not just rushing to treat a symptom is so important. So I think some of those things we need to slow down a little bit, step back, follow the issue back to its beginning, understand history, understand why we got here, and that will easily show us the way forward then. And that's the case with so many of our environmental issues, actually any issues. If you follow it back to what the root cause of the problem is, then you already know how to move forward. So I think that slowing down, that trying to understand our geographies rather than zipping through it or flying above it is really of paramount importance, and some humility. I wish we could buy humility in spades and distribute it, but some humility in the face, and just bowing down to the land, because that is what sustains us. And I come back to something that I have in the epilogue of my book. It's a quote by Wendell Berry again, which is just so perfect. He says, "What I stand for is what I stand on." That's really all we need to stand for. If we could just stand for our land and how it is meant to be used and how it is meant to be treated with respect, I think it will give us abundance, and we will never want for anything.
That's almost tempted to say it's as simple as that, in reaction to some parts of what you shared. But that's truly, it just takes, I think, to start off with a few small steps, and that can lead to so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Arti, you've met, so many people in the course of the work that you're doing, various kinds of people, and this is a very big question, but is there, I don't know, a conversation, an anecdote, an incident that's really stood out and really stayed with you, that you'd like to share with everyone?
One is hard to pick. There's so many.
Maybe
But I think
a couple. We have some time, so a couple will also do.
It's there's one which comes back to me. It gives me sleepless nights. It's on the banks of the Ganga in Bihar, in eastern Bihar. I was in this very little town called Kahalgaon, and it used to be a town of fishermen. And every evening, 400 fishing boats would go out and fish through the night and come back with lots of fish, because the Ganga was teeming and teeming with fish, and it was so giving and so bountiful. This was even about 50 years ago. And things changed a lot in the 70s. And that whole fishery of Ganga collapsed. And it collapsed because they built a barrage on the Ganga called the Faraka, and that very, very important fish, the hilsa. If there are any Bengalis listening, it's your ilish mach. And, that is an anadromous fish which, swims up to spawn, comes back, lives its life in the estuaries. Iconic fish, culturally important. No big celebration in Bengal is complete without the ilish. So, that was also a lucrative fish for fishermen and other fish too, prawns, fish, everything, right? And that whole industry collapsed because there was this interruption on the river. And so the people upstream of that river don't have any of those big fish, which, used to migrate up. And the fish used to be found all the way until Buxar, until, Allahabad, Prayagraj, all those places. So now nothing, right? Now nothing. It's not there at all. And they now find fish which are about this big, okay? They call it trash fish and they sell it to Siliguri and stuff like that. It's just not something that is lucrative anymore. It doesn't sustain them. So this, to answer your question, this conversation, I was in this fishing village and I was speaking to the mothers of young children there and youth over there. You'll see youth sitting on turnstiles at every chalk, completely with no employment, sitting on their phones, tens and scores of youth, many of them, just like everywhere, right? And so I met a mother, a group of mothers actually. They were all sitting, and I was just talking to them, and they told me, and this is the conversation that really stuck with me. They told me, "आपने बोला पढ़ाओ पढ़ाओ, तो हमने बच्चे को पढ़ाया. बच्चा फर्स्ट क्लास फर्स्ट आया अपने बीए में. He's got a history or something, BA or something like that. He's come first class first. And he's not the only one. Everybody was there with, kids who have finished their graduation. Graduate hai wo, lekin jobs nahi hai. तो कुछ काम नहीं मिल रहा, तो ऐसे बैठे हैं, अभी देखो कैसे बैठे हैं. तो पढ़ाने का क्या मतलब, कोई फायदा नहीं है. तो आपने क्यों बोला पढ़ाओ? अभी ना तो वो मछुआरा बन सकता है और ना ही कुछ और, So there's this whole bunch of kids, who are growing up in devastated landscapes. And I've seen not just one place, yeah. I'm telling you about Kahalgaon, but so many places across India where we have devastated the landscape in such a way that traditional livelihoods are decimated, they're gone, right? And so there's no way for them, there's no income, there's no way for them to sustain themselves. So of course everybody moves to the nearest big city or the next town for jobs, and there are no meaningful jobs. They get daily wage work if they're lucky, not even that all the time. And look at our cities. Are they even equipped to get these hundreds of thousands of people into, and what kind of life do they have, and what kind of education are these kids growing up with, So these kinds of, and I hear this time and time again. I've heard it in Malda, I've heard it in Murshidabad, I've heard it in Kahalgaon, like I just mentioned. I've heard it in Kerala, where the kids, yes, they go to school, but they're all kids of migrants. They've come there from somewhere else, and they don't have any prospects. And this is our demographic dividend, right? We have this young population that we are so proud of, but really, what kind of a life are we giving them? And similarly about, young girls, they're married off early because they're a burden on their parents who've lost everything. They've lost their land, they've lost their livelihood. So they're married off very young. They're married off, there's child marriage, and then there's infant mortality, maternal mortality in these places, hard to reach places, no healthcare, no education. So these are conversations that keep me awake at night, because I've seen the side which we seem to kind of gloss over when we are kind of chasing this shiny badge of our GDP and growth and so on. But there is this large chunk that asks this question. हाँ, आपने तो बोला पढ़ाने को, हमने पढ़ाया, अब क्या फायदा? So I think we need to again slow down, stop, look at what we're doing to these landscapes, especially in in large part of India, and see what if there is another way, if there is another narrative that can be as valid or even more valid.
Yeah, that's I think very telling and very true of many parts of the country. Yeah. Is there another one? You said it's difficult to choose one. We'd be, if there's something else that stands out, happy to take another one as
Actually,
well.
let me try and find something happy, something fun. Okay, I'll tell you something from Ladakh. Okay, since Ladakh is in the news also, I'll tell you a really nice conversation I had with the youth of Ladakh. And it was just so heartening, okay? the climate change is very, very visible in Ladakh because the glaciers have retreated. And because the glaciers have retreated, there is no water in springtime, which is the most important time for the crops. Most important time, spring and summer, when the apricot trees need water, when the barley fields need water, etc. So it's very important, and there's no water, right? So Sonam Wangchuk came up with this idea of the ice stupas, and there was a competition across villages who builds the highest ice stupa, and they see YouTube videos to learn how to make an ice stupa, how to therefore solve the problem themselves, and they make these ice stupas. But I think the height of the ice stupa highest one wins, biggest one wins, all that is fine. But this conversation that I had with a youngster from Gya village, which was just so heartening, Mingyur, he's a friend of mine now, he said that they built a stupa and they built a little cafe inside the stupa. Okay, this was in 2019. Okay, they built a little cafe inside the stupa. So it was like this, the only ice cafe in India. It was so cute. Okay, and there's an amazing little place with two tables and 3-4 chairs, plastic chairs, and there was a place which would make tea and coffee, and then you would get it in this stupa to drink. So you're sitting inside a stupa ice cave and drinking, and it was just fabulous, beautiful way to do it. But the interesting thing was, what did they do with that money? So what they did is they said that nobody pays attention to our seniors, our older people. Nobody pays attention to. They're kind of, if they're past their prime, they're just kind of relegated to sitting in their room doing nothing. So these youngsters, from the profits of the ice stupa, they rented a bus for these seniors and took them on a pilgrimage. They took them to all the holy places in Ladakh as a pilgrimage because they said, we want to do something for our elders. Nobody does anything for them. So, it goes back also to what Sonam Wangchuk says, where he says that give the youth a reason to stay back. Give them a meaning, why they should be in their villages. Give them that feeling of pride in their villages. And Gya, I think, is a village like that. The youth council there is very strong. They've come up with a lot of homestays where people can go and stay and actually experience how life is in a Ladakhi village. And very thoughtful kids, and so many youngsters therefore adopting. Instead of moving to Leh or moving to another city, they're reclaiming their villages and making it worth their while. And so there are a lot of these little homestays coming up and so on, and very thoughtful kids, trying to do things, give back to the community.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much, Arti. There's so much to learn and acknowledge and reckon with and be inspired by as well, I think, from all of the things that you're seeing and bringing out to the rest of us. So thank you so much, for taking the time to speak with us today, but also for all of the other stuff that you're doing. It's truly, truly fascinating.
Thank you.
And it's been wonderful to share some space with you today.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.